You're listening to the Unsung Podcast, where we talk about classic albums and decide if they deserve that distinction. And we also talk about some unsung classics in the hopes of bringing them to a new audience. And at the end of it all, we let you decide if we were right or wrong. This is the Unsung Podcast. You're listening to the Unsung Podcast, episode number 20. Last week, we spoke about Vespertine by Bjork, and the public have decided that Vespertine does indeed go into our discography, so thanks for voting on that, guys. We really appreciate that. We're really glad that you guys voted it into our discography. On this week's episode, we're talking about Cave-In's Jupiter. Now, before we started this podcast, when we were planning it out, Cave-In were one of the first bands that jumped to our collective minds, and we always knew that one day we'd come talk about this record because we all really like it. However, a few weeks ago, Caleb Schofield, the bass player in Cave-In, died in a car accident, and we thought this would be a fitting tribute. So this episode is something of a bumper episode as a result. It's kind of a retrospective on Cave-In's entire career, but also, of course, we will be arguing that this is the best Cave-In record to go into our discography. In many ways, we feel that they may be one of the ultimate unsung bands, and we hope you guys agree with us. So enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
It's that time.
It's that time again. It's the Unsung Podcast.
Hey, everybody. This is
I am your host, Mark Fraser.
That doesn't usually happen at Wembley like that.
It doesn't. Let's get ready to rumble.
Unless you're Biffy Clyro, you will whip off your top.
It sounds like you're enjoying a really nice, cool, refreshing Pepsi there, Chris.
Pepsi.
Which is funny because you look like you're sitting on a throne of Pepsi right now. If you look behind you,
I don't need to look behind me. I
You know exactly
there are
what's
many
there.
boxes.
Check out our Instagram page to see Chris sitting on a throne of Pepsi.
Yep.
Pepsi, if you're listening, I hope that satisfies our contractual obligations to you for another week.
So on my right is Chris Cusack, who is actually, ironically, he is the original Dr. Pepper himself. What was that look that you just gave me?
Chris is buckled,
right?
ladies and gentlemen.
I've buckled him. Come on, Doctor.
That is literally a knockout blow of power. Yeah, I have no comeback from that.
Maybe you can introduce him though. See what his name is.
I'd forgotten. Yeah, and on my left is David Weaver, a man with an incredibly hip shirt on tonight. Sun. Oh, is it Sun?
It's
or is
Sun,
it Sun
isn't
O?
it?
It's just Sun.
Well, why do they do the O or
Because
the zero in the brackets?
Because
Amp thing.
it's the amp and the zero is the sun, and it's like sun.
But it's a zero. It's not an O.
But it's not a zero.
perfect sphere.
No, but then what the band have done is they've taken the logo from the amp and called themselves that.
I know, but the
But-
sun is a perfect sphere almost.
You don't look at the sun and go, "Oh, it's not a letter; it's just a circle."
Well, you're saying
You don't
it's
have to- you don't
an
have to-
an exclamation of primitive amazement at the sun. Sun. Ooh.
It's not that. No,
It's not that.
It's not that.
Sun
it's
zero.
just. It's just a logo of
So
the
why
sun.
didn't they pick an O that was round instead
Because
of
they're
a
just
zero?
being weird.
And then brackets. Why the brackets? Is that
Because
the rays of the sun?
Yeah.
You know, it radiates out in all directions. It doesn't just go.
Yeah, but what you've got to do is bring that up with the designer of the original logo of Sun Amps.
Plus, it makes no sense if you're from the Middle East because you're reading brackets first, then it's zero, then it's nus.
Yep. That's how it works.
Anyway,
isn't
to
it?
my left is David Weaver, cooler guy than me, with some funny ideas about the shape of the sun.
Before we get into this episode, we've got a very special announcement we're going to make at the end of this episode, and you're going to love it. We're going to love it.
We already love it.
Yeah, I love it. I just love
we
it.
are so into it. We're so into it, which will be worth sticking around for.
And since we mentioned Astral Matters, we are today discussing the album Jupiter by the really quite wonderful band Cave-In.
Very nice. Good
that
segue.
was quite the segue.
You'd think I'd done this
10
times.
out of 10.
We've been planning on doing Cave-In for quite a while. I think when we started the podcast, you sit about in a pub and you throw names at each other, and this was one that we were all quite enthused about. But unfortunately, we felt it was appropriate to do it because sadly, Caleb Schofield, the bassist from Cave-In, also a member of bands like Old Man Gloom, died a few weeks ago now in a traffic accident in the United States. And there is a fund set up for Caleb online to help his family. In the aftermath of that, he had 2 young children and a wife. First really overly sort of sincere point of the podcast so far, I think, but that was really genuinely sad news. I was speaking to some people today that said it's probably the most they'd felt inverted commas rock death, and I have to say, yeah, it kind of hit pretty hard, especially given the circumstances. So it's a fitting time to honour the guy's legacy and just come in straight out the traps and say he was a member of a terrific band called Cave-In, amongst others. And Jupiter, for me, it's my choice, is their best album, albeit I think they have many good albums, and we're going to dig into that a wee bit because they actually are quite a rich source of discussion. How about you guys?
I'm very happy. I mean, it would be ridiculous if we didn't have Cave-In at some point, really, because
But
there's
the-
a...
The perennial outsiders, though, of that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah,
Absolutely,
exactly.
yeah.
But I mean, for this podcast, they're kind of perfect.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Because they're just such a fucking brilliant band. I suppose the only issue for me was which record do you choose? So I'm looking forward to talking about why you've chosen this one.
Yeah, we'll crack through because it was a thoroughly interesting episode to write notes for alone, and I spent a good 10 days just devouring their back catalogue. So it's been good. It's just a pity as to happen in these circumstances because we'd love to have done it anyway, but hopefully it'll turn a few people on to a band that they haven't heard and remind a few other people just how good this band was, because that's certainly what it did to me.
There was no competition for me when it came to a Cave-In record. This was the one that I would have went for immediately. Just, we'll get into it later on, I guess, but for me it is just chock full of tunes doing all the things that Cave-In do best.
Yeah, but I think the thing it does that Cave-In are most renowned for is a completely bold bit of musical reinvention, because they're a band that throughout their career has consistently adapted its sound, changed its sound, gone this way, gone that way, and relatively fearlessly pursued what it thought was the best musical result as opposed to the most conducive to success, I think, even with their mainstream dalliances. But yeah, we'll get there. So just to kind of bring people up to speed, if you're not familiar with Cave-In, they're ostensibly a 4-piece band in their kind of most consistent lineup with Stephen Brodsky, Adam McGrath, J.R. Connors and the late Caleb Schofield. Jupiter itself is from 2000, and they released a lot of stuff with the label Hydra Head, who I'm pretty sure we're going to cross paths with on a few other shows as well. Hydra Head were a label that was originally based in Boston, although I think they moved to California. And they worked with a lot.
Turner.
Yeah, Aaron Turner from the band ISIS. But Hydra Head released a lot of like post-metal bands like Pelican and ISIS and Cable, the American Cable, and also a lot of kind of this sort of metal core-ish, more emo-y tinge stuff that Cave-In did. The band was started by Jay Frschetti and Brodsky way back in like 1995, and I think they were only 15 or 16 at the time. I think they took their name from a Codeine song, who are also a band I think we'll probably mention at some point. I'm a big fan of Codeine. Their first record came out in 97, and I think, as you could probably guess by that point, they were still only about 16 or 17, and one of the things that I know marked Cave-In out was that they were this group of inordinately talented young guys arriving on what was already a strong metal scene in the kind of northeast of the United States. I think by the time he was 18, Brodsky was already playing in Converge, because he's in the When Forever Comes Crashing album, and Balu from Converge worked on a lot of Cave-In stuff, especially early on. It reminded me a wee bit of a band that actually used to exist in Scotland called Allergo, who coincidentally also experienced their own tragic circumstances. Their drummer, Graham Motion, I think he drowned. And that was another situation where you saw this group of ridiculously young, like guys that were way too young to be in bars. You know, I remember seeing them in Stirling, of all places, these like 15, 16-year-old boys setting up and then just ripping into this music that was like Dillinger Escape Plan levels of complicated and played just superbly. and just all these like guys 10, 15 years older than them, just their jaws hanging off their face. And Cave-In were similar in that way. They're just these kids that came out of nowhere and had just obviously like had a real natural flair and had been honing their talents in their bedroom. So their original music though was very technical, like metalcore effectively. But what they became known for really was their ability to adapt and to progress their sound. But Dave, I know you know them a wee bit.
Mm-hmm.
When did you first encounter them?
It was actually a Terrorizer cover mount CD.
Brilliant.
Back in, must have been 2000, 2001, and it was a song from Jupiter. It was Big Riff that was on that. I think I didn't actually buy Jupiter because I was hamstrung by whatever Inverness HMV stocked, and that was pretty much all I had to go on. If they didn't have the record, then I didn't own the record.
What about Ullapool HMV?
I'm from Allness.
Sorry. I am sorry.
There was no HMV in Allness. There was a Macintosh Brothers newsagents, which occasionally had some CDs
Counting
in
Crows?
it. I bought my mum Sheryl Crow for her birthday once.
Okay.
And I remember I bought my dad a Chris Rea album from Macintosh Brothers as well. But no, so I didn't have this record, so I kind of had to rely on downloading torrents over 56k modem.
All NES speed.
Or not torrents. It wasn't even torrents, it was Napster or whatever.
Yeah.
And then whenever they occasionally had tracks on cover mount CDs.
So I was kind of went in the other way in the sense that I was hanging about with some people that were quite into metal at the time, and I was just starting to kind of understand the genre a bit. And my friend Michael already had Until Your Heart Stops, which was their first proper album. They had an album prior to that called Beyond Hypothermia, which was really a collection of EPs and things like that. But Until Your Heart Stops was their first kind of like...
It was their studio debut.
Studio debut, yeah. They recorded it with Kurt Ballou. Caleb Schofield had joined. A guy called David Scrod had been in vocals prior to that. Frascetti had long since gone. Scrod had been in vocals. He'd left, apparently, I think 2 weeks before the recording, which had left Stephen Brodsky with the vocal duties. But it was where the band really congealed. You know, they really became this incredibly solid unit. But it was a very heavy album. It was a really, really heavy album with like moments that kind of kill switch engagey kind of stuff in it.
There was like proper chug, and then there was like mathcore stuff.
Yeah,
and there
it had moments of that kind of genty thing we spoke about in Meshuggah. They dabbled with those kind of little things. Metallic hardcore, basically, but with like
it was early on
real metal. And then there were like standout tracks. There was a track called Juggernaut that really broke out off that album early on.
Yeah.
And that had these really astral sort of intertwining, spiraling guitar lines in it that kind of gave you a hint that the band had kind of slightly bigger ideas, like more ambitious ideas. But they didn't really, I mean, the album didn't like set anything on fire.
No, it was well respected.
Yeah,
but
exactly. And then after that, in 99, that was in 98. In 99, they put out an EP called Creative Eclipses, which is what really caught people off guard. And this is like, it's at this point that the band were going to concerts and getting booed by the crowd. And I remember Adam McGrath, the second guitarist, describing them getting heckled and called things like faggots by a fairly unforgiving portion of the hardcore audience that they were used to playing to. But I think one of the reasons for doing that, according to Brodsky as well, especially, was that they were just so keen to get away from this constant cycle of touring with these kind of like macho, chest beating, metallic hardcore groups that he found so restricting. So they put out the Creative Eclipses EP, which was like 5 tracks and really diverse. And it included a cover of the band Failure, if I remember.
Magnified.
Magnified, that's it. And who are a really good band and really worth it checking out in and of themselves. But that did tip people off that something was changing within this band, and it was the following year that Jupiter came out. As you say, Jupiter, especially the track Big Riff that you heard in that Terrorizer disc, really was like caused a lot of ripples. It was described at the time by Spin magazine as like an emo metal Radiohead. And
yeah, I remember reading reviews, and Radiohead were getting dropped a lot. The name, just as a sort of, as everybody still does, journalists just use it as a byword for
any modern prog. I kind of
exactly. Thinking beyond a genre.
I mean, I think the band admired that, and I think it was pretty hard to ignore Radiohead at the time. Like the turn of the millennium, it was like they were pretty ubiquitous. But there was a lot more like bands like Rush involved in them as well. Though, I think King Crimson, things like that. There was a lot of prog in their own listening habits that really informed the stuff that came out in Jupiter. And we'll go back to Jupiter, but then to kind of skip on and give you an idea of the chronology as well. That was followed by that Tides of Tomorrow EP, which was even further away. I mean, and Jupiter at least had the heavy moments in it. The Tides of Tomorrow became, certainly it wasn't like emo, it wasn't grungy. It was quite distinct and sort of atmospheric.
No, it was like it's spacey art rock type. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably spacey art rock is probably a good way to put it. And there was a track in it called Come Into Your Own, which almost had this weird kind of upbeat bass, and it's almost Caribbean.
The song that I heard off that was the Calypso, which is kind of similar.
Absolutely.
And obviously it's called the Calypso as well. And I think the artwork as well, it looked like a beach on the moon.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
it did. It looked like a space beach. That's pretty much, and that's kind of what the music sounded like
exactly.
as well. Yeah, I mean, they really went in big time for their kind of space imagery and stuff as well. Anyway, and their satellite kind of.
But they had that sort of those surfy rock lead guitars going on, and and
really loads of processing and effects and stuff like that in their setup. I saw them at the Barfly in 2000, maybe. Like, it was one of the first shows that I was living in Stirling at the time, but one of the first shows that I really made the effort to come through to, despite no obvious means of transport.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was an absolutely breathtaking concert. But when the band played, there were maybe only about 20 people in this venue that could hold best part of 200.
Yeah.
And it was stunning. They were playing their guitars using these like toy guns, like toy laser guns.
Yeah.
That, the kind of guns that they kind of make that kind of noise, but when they're held on the strings and on the pickups. So they were playing the riffs using these guns to play like slide guitar, but then the actual sound from the gun was getting picked up by the strings and the pedals.
Yeah.
You had this amazing like mesh of these different things going on at once, and both guitarists were doing it. It wasn't just one. So you had this really cosmic, delayed, reverby thing. It was astonishing, given that this was a band that less than 2 years prior had literally been doing stuff that sounded like Killswitch Engage.
Yeah.
It was interesting though that the number of people that attended that show, given that it was so quiet, despite some initial early acclaim, they'd already, in the space of one EP and one record, shaken off a large portion of people that would have counted themselves as their audience. I mean, even at that gig, I think it was a band called Churn that were one of the bands that opened for them, and they were a conventionally heavy hardcore band, really good one, but fairly straight in that sense. And so they were still getting billed by a lot of promoters with those bands, despite the fact that their sound was a lot closer to Radiohead by that point than it was to, Agnostic Front or something like that. And it was really odd but really fascinating to see a band so willing to take a chance with its own following. Hi folks, sorry to interrupt the show, hope you're having a nice time. As per usual for the world's most bootstrapped music podcast, we are today recording on location, after hours, in a work office, so you may hear the odd bus go by. We're also using adapters that Mark bought on the internet, which clearly come from China, because none of them work.
China?
So we're thinking about imposing tariffs on Mark for future recordings to justify the amount of time we waste trying to get things to work and fixing them with sellotape. Anyway, if you could donate something to this podcast, that may help eliminate these problems one at a time. Please go to unsungpod.net/donate and do give generously so that we can stop doing these begging letters. Thanks.
I only got into Cave-In a few years ago, actually. I was quite late to the party because, like I said, I'm a punk. I've said it before, I'm a punk. So anything even vaguely metally took me a while to actually get into it. I think I only got into Cave-In not long before I got to Converge, actually. And the first thing I listened to was Jupiter, and that was it for me.
Yeah.
I was just into it straight away. I was saying this to Dave earlier on as well. I can totally understand why a major label would want to sign this band after hearing Jupiter. Like it is very different again, you know, and it's full of like the catchy hooks and melodies, which you kind of hinted at before, but not really. And then there's this, and it does sound like Radiohead is an easy comparison. You're right, but it does have a lot of the elements of that grander concept or sort of grander sort of drive.
I think some of it comes down as well to their choice of chord progressions. Like they weren't scared to do something that was quite somber, like almost quite morose at times. Like there are points on it where they go down these very sad chords, you know, like it's like minor to another minor to something diminished, and you know that was quite reminiscent of some of the stuff Radiohead had done on, for example, OK Computer. You know,
yep.
That would have been their point of reference for that, I guess. You know, 'cause that would have been the latest Radiohead record. I suppose if they were using them as a reference, they might not have done. But I did notice that this record is actually in E flat as well. So it's not actually downtuned. So it's not even that heavy.
Well, it's down a half step.
Yeah, but not downtuned to like a drop tuning.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah. It's not a conventional metal tuning, perhaps. Yeah, no, you're right.
Although Iron Maiden played in E flat, so
it's obviously the best tuning.
Are they metal? That was pantomime.
I think they were at one point.
I mean, it's interesting that even though you got into Cave-In much later, it's interesting that it was this album that you got into, because by far their highest profile album was Antenna.
Mm-hmm.
And Antenna was maybe the logical conclusion of what they'd been doing, in the sense that it was their major label debut. Well, it was their only major label record, as it turned out. And it was all the poppiest instincts from their previous work, including the EPs, taken to its extreme. I mean, there's stuff on that, there's tracks on that chord-wise are almost comparable with Oasis. There's a couple of kind of like trippy, krauty ones, or
there's some big riffs though.
Yeah, there's some big riffs.
You know, like
there's some
Inspire
great songs
and stuff. You know, that's a great track.
Inspire's dead cheesy though. That da 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 da.
Yeah, but it's like it's like a signature Cave-In.
It is, you know.
But I know in that way, in that sort of flirting with the mainstream way, but
it never sat well with me, Inspire, though, because it felt quite clumsy compared to some of the bigger riffs on other tracks, and even on that album. So like Rubber and Glue and Stained Silver I think one of them was actually previously called Bigger Riff. They felt like much more innovative riffs. The riff for Inspire was just stodgy. It was part of why a lot of people felt, even the people that had gone with them in their kind of prog adventures, felt quite sold a little short at certain points of that album. Not all of the album. I mean, for example, the single Anchor got quite criticised, yet it's a great song. Like, I mean, if that had been put out by somebody like Idlewild, for example, that kind of direct driving verse chorus approach that they did, it's a really lean bit of writing, and it's a really catchy tune. It just never really took. They just didn't seem a natural fit for that.
But Antenna's not got really good critical reception as well. I remember reading about it crying, and it was they were definitely compared to the Foo Fighters at the time.
Well, they toured with Foo Fighters.
Toured with Foo Fighters and Muse on the back of it. Yeah, I mean there was a push by RCA, who then merged or got bought over by Sony BMG. There was a push by them behind Cave-In to sort of make something.
I think it got reviewed by mainstream and pop reviewers as really interesting, straightforward rock music. But I think a lot of people that had seen where they'd come from were like, I'm just not quite sure that it's, you know, as interesting as this band could be.
It's that major label thing as well, isn't it? It's like, if you're familiar with them, then it's like, oh, sellouts.
Yeah,
Automatically
and I mean,
colours
that
your
was
thought, you know.
I mean, they were already getting abuse for their change of direction, so that, I mean, when they then signed to the major label and went for this real pop album, that was the death knell for a lot of their earlier fans who had gone with them a bit. But I mean, it's interesting though, because they apparently went with the major label thing because they were really impressed with the A&R guy at the label at the time, Bruce somebody, I can't remember his name. But when the merger happened with RCA and Sony BMG, I think that guy left and the band found it very uncomfortable to stay with that label. Now, they'd maintained in their earlier interviews, as you can imagine bands probably do, that the label had been very hands-off and had allowed them, you know, artistic freedom and all the usual stuff. But it seemed to transpire. I mean, they didn't even bring out another record on RCA because they started demoing new stuff, and the new stuff was a return to their much heavier sound. And the label just was like, we're not approving that. And so they ended up getting out their contract, which is good for them, and went back to doing much heavier music. But once that had happened, their interviews were a little bit more candid, where they were like, yeah, well, to be fair, there were a lot of people involved in the process. As with any major label, rather than having one or two people, a manager and an agent, they had a dozen people that at various stages that they were consulting with, and that all had opinions and that all had ideas about what single should go out, what the artwork should be, how they should be marketed, how they should look. And they just never seemed like a natural fit for that, especially coming from where they came from. And I think one of the most blatant manifestations of how unsuited they were was that there was a meet and greet. Can you imagine that Spinal Tap thing where they're all, getting together to meet and greet in 2003, 2004, and nobody showed up. So you've got a band there with the label and nobody came to meet and greet the band, and you're like, boom, that's got to like dent your ego, and it's certainly not got to. That's the point where you see the expressions on the face of the record label people going, okay, this isn't going to wash. So yeah, I mean, and I think you get the feeling that the band maybe rebelled against that a wee bit with their writing, because they went back to writing much heavier stuff, and in 2005 brought out Perfect Pitch Black back on Hydra Head, with whom they'd maintained a pretty good relationship. I think they'd still distribute the vinyl for the other albums. And in 2005 they were playing stuff that was much more palatable to their original audience again. It was less technical, it was less metal.
It was less hardcore.
Yeah. But it was heavy, and it had like a better balance between Schofield's roared vocals. Like Stephen Brodsky had long since stopped doing the roaring and the shouting. He said part of the reason for their creative change was because his voice couldn't put up with the demands of touring, and couldn't put up with the shouting and the screaming. So that's partly why they'd adapted their sound. But at this point, Schofield, who had a tremendous roar, he kind of took over a lot of the singing duties, and they started like really trading it. Brodsky singing and Schofield doing some of the really heavier riffs, and things like Juggernaut had appeared back in their set lists, and people kind of realised that the band were turning back towards it. And it was just another example of them shedding an audience, because then you had a whole bunch of people, and I had friends who, some of whom were big Radiohead fans, who got turned on to Cave In, and it's Jupiter, by all accounts, is still one of their favourite albums, but they then left the band when they heard Perfect Pitch Black. They were like, I don't want that screaming, shouting stuff. They're not interested in that. You can kind of see how they failed to acquire that critical mass when every 2 years they were basically shedding 50% of this audience that they just built up. And yeah, I mean, and that happened again at this point. I think as well, after that album there was an injury in J.R. Connors, who was a really distinctive part of the band with his drumming style, a little bit reminiscent at times actually of Twilight Sad, the way we talked about that big bombastic drum effect that he did, especially in Jupiter. He left the band, and they temporarily toured with Ben Collar from Converge, and then went on a announced a hiatus. I think at one point, in fact, Adam McGrath, who joined Clouds, was actually listed as ex-Cave In, albeit I don't think they'd ever intended to formally break up, but it looked like they were dead in the water. And it took 3 years before they came back with a thing called the Planets of Old EP, which is cracking.
Really fast and technical, and
really
like,
heavy.
We can do this as well as any younger band.
Yep, there's a tune on that called Cayman Tongue, and that's ferocious. good. And Schofield again, very prominent in the vocal duties. And then finally 2011 they brought out White Silence, which was obviously Connor's back on the drums for both of them. And White Silence is a really bizarre album. I mean, the first tune in it almost sounds like experimental black metal. There's no drums in it. It's just really saturated, overdriven noise with screaming over it. Yeah. And then the Serpents, Sing My Loves, Vicious Circles, like there's loads of really, really strong tracks, and that's quite heavy. Weirdly though, at the end of it, it lapses into this little spell of kind of bizarre, kind of quirky, knee-jerk indie. And Caven have always done that, and I don't think it's always been to their benefit. They had a song called Beautiful Sun on Antenna that was just so cringeworthy, and they do that again on this. They just have this weird judgmental thing that you kind of wish you could say to the band, just leave that one out. That's not strong. I know what you're doing, and it doesn't really work. You're weakening the album overall. But you know, they did it. Their back catalogue is scattered with more than a few really dodgy moments. They're also a band that are really prone to some pretty brutally cringeworthy lyrics at times. But it is what it is, you know, coming from hardcore. Hardcore's not necessarily famous for its complex moral philosophy. Yeah, I mean, it's a strong back catalogue, even before you directly go into it. And any number of these records, the EPs as well, could have been contenders for this. I mean, Dave, you were saying about
Tides of Tomorrow,
and also Perfect Pitch Black.
I really like that record, yeah. And I think I remember it coming out to sort of muted reviews.
It doesn't, yeah. I mean, the reviews for it aren't particularly complimentary. Yeah.
But I still go back to it. It's got some, you know, really great tracks on it. And I remember listening to that album on a big drive through the States. It's just like perfect, heavy road trip music.
There's a tune on that in particular called Trepanning.
Yeah, so good.
Oh, it's just brilliant.
Yeah.
Schofield at his best, like both on the bass and the vocals. It's just a wonderful song, and that's apparently about their experiences on RCA and them really kind of like exorcising their demons for how it was on that. Have you heard any of the other records, Mark?
Listened to Perfect Pitch Black.
How did you find it?
Which is really good. Drupanning's a fucking banger, yeah, for sure.
There's a song in that called Paranormal as well that's back to their kind of soaring, kind of euphoric thing.
Moonlight comes through the shades now. Moonlight comes through the shades now.
It's a strong record, actually. I think it's been really
Ataraxia as well has just got like absolute beast of a bass line.
Yeah, another great song. And it's been really undervalued because Jupiter is held in high regard. I think almost more than any other record they've put out, it's been undervalued.
Yeah.
So in terms of unsung, it's really, I think, unfairly weighed in on.
Yep.
Albeit it isn't as good. It isn't nearly as groundbreaking or as adventurous or accomplished as Jupiter.
Yeah.
But it really merits listening to, as does almost anything they've put out, I think. Beyond Hypothermia is okay. It's a collection of young guys on early EPs, but it really, everything in here is worth the time.
Let's talk about Jupiter then, since we're on the subject. Starts off with Jupiter.
You've done this before.
I have done this before. This is not my first rodeo.
It's a good song.
It's a pretty good song, yeah. The thing I like the most about it is it's just the band are at their peak, aren't they, really? Like as songwriters and as musicians, and they fucking love abusing whammy pedals as well.
Oh, they love a whammy and a pitch shifter. Yeah, I mean, I think, like, or an octave or rather. Jupiter as well does that thing where it's it's a really iconic opening.
Yeah.
The opening
Yeah.
riff of Jupiter is just like a great way to announce an album.
Well, and it sort of sets their stall because it sounds so different to what's gone before as well.
The melody's the ace as well.
Yeah.
The melody's really good.
That line, the metronome is wrong again, just kicking
Well,
off.
Yeah.
The metronome is wrong again. My heart has surely gone and skipped a beat. And once the rhythm is alright, I can understand your point of view.
Terrific song. It's a weird album in that sense though, because it's straight off the back of that is the first point where you can imagine their old crowd balking, because they go into the song In the Stream of Commerce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's got that falsetto vocal that follows the guitar line, and you can picture the screwed up faces of
Yeah,
guys
of
in
these,
white beater shirts.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? It's almost like they've done their Jazz Odyssey sort of, we hope
Yep.
you like a new direction.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's really cheesy as well though. I mean, that bit at the end, now you're so lucky to be alive, is just it's Cave-In just over egging the pudding.
Mhm.
You know, it's them just going that little step too far, but you grant them license because the song's brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, but it is that thing where their lyrics are like, oh,
Got those Middle Eastern style melodies, which they're really, really good at doing.
yeah, they like their
Mhm.
scales. I
Mhm.
totally. It's a good way to test if you're going to like Cave-In. Basically, if you like In the Stream of Commerce, a good way to know if Jupiter's going to be up your street.
Yeah.
And the vocals are so different, especially given that Brodsky's got this. Otherwise, you may have noticed in his albums this tendency to do a James Hetfield. You ever notice that? He does that a lot.
Mhm.
Like when he pushes the syllables on the ends of vowels, man, it's really reminiscent of James Hetfield.
Well, it's interesting you mention that, because one of the notes I had taken for this was like it's got the bass and the drums have got like a kind of late 80s, early 90s kind of metal sound to them almost, which kind of is underlined by that kind of Middle Eastern thing, which Metallica do quite a lot of anyway. And their guitar solos, they kind of fall back
using
on
those modes rather
Eastern
than scales.
melodies.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that you mentioned Metallica there, even though they don't sound like Metallica. You can definitely hear the influence.
I mean, they're like
lot of
huge
places.
metal fans.
Yeah.
There's absolutely, I mean, they're well skilled in it. You can tell that. And I mean, straight out In the Stream of Commerce into Big Riff, the one from Terrorizer. And Big Riff for me is the archetypal Cave-In song. It's so good, and it does
Aye, it's just amazing.
ticks every single box. Like
Yep.
It's the only track on this album with actual screaming as well. You know, with Schofield doing the heavy vocals.
But yeah, it's got so much melody in it.
Oh,
A lot
it-
of melody.
really
Yeah.
understated. It's got the kind of rolling marching drums. It's got the big bombastic drums.
You're another quarter running killed this child, made sure I raised him well.
Tons and tons of great changes and a huge euphoric ending. You know, that kind of on a one way. What's the lyric?
On a concrete road to recovery, 'cause I'm knocking over every code in front of me.
It's literally up there in probably my top 10 songs of all time.
Some of the heavy parts in it sound a bit like Deftones as well, like guitars especially. It's happens a few times on this record. I don't know if that's intentional or not. There's definitely a bit of that vibe on it, I feel, as well.
I'm not sure. Maybe it's just a production thing, but
Could be. But I mean, this also came out in the peak in new metal, so
Well,
it
that's
could be a
it. This is
production
kind of
thing.
happening like parallel to all this terrible music being, released.
Which is why it was such a relief as well.
mainstream. Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's like we talked in our sort of new metal mixtape about the amount of money getting thrown at
Yeah, totally.
that stodgy shit. But then there was really interesting stuff happening here coming from hardcore rather than coming from metal
Yeah.
necessarily, because you're having Converge and you're having this. And then another band that I think were really influenced by not just the sound, but by the trajectory of Cave-In were Poison the Well,
interesting. Yeah,
who, started off with their first record was just a straightforward hardcore slam album. And then They just progressed a little bit. And then by 2003 released You Come Before You, which I think is just a ridiculously good record. But I don't think it would have existed without Jupiter, you know, paving the way for a hardcore band being able to be expansive.
Broadening the horizons. It's like that Overton window thing that we spoke about, where you just suddenly shift what is feasible within a conversation. Not alone by any means. There's a lot of other bands doing really inventive stuff, like Refused and stuff as well.
Dillinger and all of these bands.
But they were part of a movement to expand the possibilities of of a specific genre, and it was certainly one of the highlights of that.
And just to go back to something we said earlier on, the melodies in this song are one of the reasons why a major label would go, by the way, there's something in that
Absolutely.
You can use. You know?
You're right. Especially that end refrain as well, the Road to Recovery bit is just, that shows real, was it nous? You know, real kind of like, these guys have an ear for something that could...
But then you've got like a track like Requiem, which is just, you know, got every single thing in it.
Yeah, a 9-minute prog song.
Yeah,
loads
exactly.
of key changes and stuff, It's such a weird ending to that song as well. It goes it does that Radiohead. That's one of the ones that does the Radiohead diminished sort of minor, ultra somber thing. Then it just decides, all right, we're going to finish this. Let's finish it upbeat, and does that no good reason, give good reason, kind of weird, incongruous, kind of like happy ending. It's dead strange. Like, I mean, I like it.
No,
But
it
it's
works in the overall flow of the record, I think, because it just keeps you on your toes. Because that's the thing with this album, is you never know what it's going to do next.
Yeah, I mean,
Even though
Requiem
it's got a brilliant ambience to it, and it all sounds like it's off the same album, but like you don't actually know what sort of turn they're taking.
Yeah, I mean, Requiem sounds like it was written in acts. It's only 9 minutes long, but it literally goes through phases.
Yeah,
like some kind of like weird opera thing.
The big riff's the same though, isn't it? It's kind of goes in movements too.
I think Big Riff.
Yeah.
One of the reasons it's such a strong song is because it does it more naturally. That's the only thing. It's the tracks that follow Big Riff as well. Innuendo and Out the Other.
I hate that title so much.
I know that title annoys me, but
that's the kind of thing you come up with and you think it's funny and then you change it, but these guys didn't change it. But weirdly, that song, it starts very, very similarly to Juggernaut. But then underlines the fact that they were going in a different direction. So Juggernaut, which started with that motif, then went really heavy in it, thunderous stuff. This one goes the opposite way and it becomes delicate and it's got like choral harmonized vocals at the end, and it's really a good example of coming from a similar place and then taking it in completely different directions. I think track 5 as well, just prior to Requiem, Brain Candle, is one of the best.
Yeah,
as well.
I fucking love that song.
It's aged so well.
It really has, yeah.
It's one of the most kind of MOR, like, it's tracks like that you're talking about, the major label thing. Tracks like Brain Candle are the ones that fitted well with the Foo Fighters tour.
It's a big driving song like Foo Fighters, you know, it's that kind of thing.
But really, it's just like, for such a simple tune, it's just lasted so well. Yeah, and I mean, the album, it starts to get really uncompromising because of that Decay of the Delay, which is totally instrumental, really iconic. That motif that goes through it is almost the sound of this album. You know, that descent part that the guitar does. All the effects, the layers of like guitar processing and stuff, it's so typically the space rock that the cover is illustrating, you know, with the picture of the planet and the satellites and
the proper sci-fi feel.
It really is. And that's the one when I saw them at Barfly where they really, you know, went to town with those ray guns playing the guitars, and it just was so cool and so astral, and you know, it was tremendous. And you were talking about acoustic guitars as well.
New Moon, yeah. That's probably my favourite song on the album.
Really interesting. It's a really beautiful song. The ending to New Moon is just such a euphoric way to end the record as well. That big build up.
It does feel like going into space a bit. No, that's what it feels like. The whole end of the record, then just accelerating.
It's really pretty.
Thanks.
But I mean, it's an album as well that I think they arranged the album itself well.
Yeah.
The track order, because it's a challenging album, and I can imagine that with too many of the more difficult songs back to back, it could have been really fatiguing. It does take a bit of work. It's not the easiest album that we've covered, in the sense that without a doubt, up to Big Riff, maybe up to Brain Candle after a while, you're like, yeah, this is relatively easy going. And then you have to go through Requiem and Decay of Delay and New Moon. And that takes a bit longer to really get up to speed with that. I think they are more challenging songs, let alone because Requiem's 9 minutes long. But because of that, it lasts really well. There's so much in there that it's an album that's stayed really fresh.
I hadn't heard it for a while because I'm not huge fans like you guys. And I remember when I first listened to it, I did find it quite difficult. But listening to it recently for this, I actually found it to be a lot less challenging than it was before. I don't know if that's because my music taste have shifted, but I enjoyed it a lot more. I enjoyed it at the time when I first heard it, but I enjoyed it even more on this listen round, you know.
This album, I think we're all pretty unanimous on how good this album is, let alone how good this band is. And the fact that they have probably more than one contender, well, they certainly have more than one contender for underrated albums. What do you think it says, though, about the hardcore crowd? Because, I mean, so many genres, not just punk genres, are very purist in their sensibilities. And yet, Cave In did something. They took a journey within a genre. They didn't entirely leave it. They took a journey to the outermost reaches of a certain genre and really expanded it and benefited it going forward and paved the way to some extent for other bands that have then gone on to do really inventive things with that genre. But do you think the hardcore and metallic hardcore kind of scene is any more narrow-minded than some of the others?
I don't know if it is. I don't
Maybe
know.
not anymore. I can see it being a thing at the time, though.
Yeah, maybe at the time. I mean, you were coming from the remnants of like sort of late 80s, early 90s hardcore, which was, you know, just testosterone and sick of it all and stuff like that. And it took bands like this to allow the genre to be progressive in any way.
You're saying they're a metallic hardcore Rosa Parks?
No, not them specifically, but like
We're going to get complaints.
No, it got to the stage at the early 90s where, you know, hardcore was doing all it could do within those confines, and it took a load of different bands to, you know, try different things.
Hardcore is a genre, though, that sometimes, to its detriment, prides itself in its observance of tropes.
Well, certainly you get... I mean, hardcore is sort of defined historically by principles, moral principles as well. You know, straight edge and things like that all come from the hardcore scene.
As someone that's 32 and still in a hardcore band, the usage of those tropes is something that I enjoy. In my experience of being in hardcore bands and being part of the hardcore scene in this city for a while, or hardcore adjacent, I don't go to a lot of the
hardcore adjacent.
Yeah, because I don't go to some of the more kind of, you know, the kind of GHC shows, that kind of stuff. But it's really interesting because a lot of people who are heavy into hardcore when they're younger, they don't grow out of it, but then their tastes shift as they get older, and they start finding things like the Smiths and all that, which they never had touched before.
I saw an excellent meme, and it's like, you're a former teenage hardcore kid. What are you into now? And it's like, tick these boxes, and it's like barbershop culture. Or
start a bar.
Yeah, start a bar, you know, craft ale or all, and it's basically like 7 things.
I'm that guy.
And it's like, I know one of each of it, all of those people.
I know a painful number of kids that were into hardcore and stuff that now listen to stuff like The National.
Yeah. That happens so much, man. And Cave In were ahead of the game, I think, in that sense. If they did another record before this one, which was heavy, I think their fans would have came the journey with them.
Funnily enough, I think you look at, I mentioned them earlier, Poison the Well was like, they had 2 really heavy records that were more straightforward hardcore, and then You Come Before You was expansive, but it was still heavy, and then they went down tropical rock route, and they never quite had that backlash. They were never seen as sort of scene traitors or whatever,
Right.
even though by the end of it they were doing, you know, shit that sounded absolutely nothing like when they started. They didn't seem to be as deliberately obtuse against their, you know, fan base. But I mean, it's funny. It is funny how, like, I was just thinking about fans in general, how they have a sense of ownership of a band when it's like, band are just making the fucking music they want to make. Like, just fucking let them do that. Who cares? Like, just enjoy what you get, and then
vote with your
if you
feet.
don't like the new record, then just go, oh, they're doing something different now. I'll go and listen to someone else. Don't go, fucking traitors, fucking shit, sellout.
I don't think Jane Doe would have been as well received by fans if Converge hadn't made at least the records they did, the heavy records they did, the way they did beforehand.
Because they
sense.
earned their stripes.
Yeah, exactly. They'd earned that, you know.
See, I think one of the things about hardcore that maybe marks it out, it strikes me that there are some bands from hardcore, whatever end of it, metallic or punk or whatever, like, that have really kicked out in some really interesting directions. So the really obvious example is Fugazi, right? The notion of rebellion, the notion of punk, the notion of anti-establishmentism, you know, can sometimes manifest itself in these really creative ways where even within the genre, people are then like, this is becoming too monolithic. Let's rebel against the rebellion, and it seems like that's a far more punk thing to do than, for example, Refused to come back years later and release an overproduced album of things that people expect them to do. And so people accusing Cave In of being sellouts for doing Jupiter when they took a massive gamble and they could have played it safe, like so many other bands have done. It seems
Exactly. Surely a band like Immure are more sellouts just because they keep doing the same breakdown
thing,
to sell the same
exactly.
amount of records to the same amount of people.
That's noxiously unpunk because you're completely conforming to the expectations.
Yeah.
I think it's a conversation we'll revisit in a couple of weeks with another record.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, that sounds like a teaser to me. And I'm teased, and I'm one of three.
So Jupiter by Cave In.
I mean, back of the net.
Yeah, I think it should go in.
After 50 minutes of rigorous discussion, I think we agree that this should go into the discography.
I think it's a fitting tribute to Caleb Schofield as well, as is almost an entire back catalogue.
But I think this is the record that defined how much of a fuck they didn't give and how much
How
they
brave
wanted.
they were, yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Please go out and listen to some Cave In honour of the big man, and some Old Man Gloom, who are tremendous.
Oh, I was
Very good
listening
band,
to... So he was in another band called Zozobra.
That's right, his trio thing.
But Zozobra were named after a Old Man Gloom song called Zozobra, which is like 28 minutes long. And I listened to it on the drive down from the north last night. And fucking hell, it's such a tune. It's got like... It's a 28-minute long, like, doom, like, post-metal song. And it has like at least 4 of the best riffs I've ever heard in my life. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. Please,
Anyway.
in memory of Caleb Schofield, raise a glass, raise whatever you want, but go and listen to some of his music, because the man had talent and he'll be sadly missed. I've no idea if Cave In are going to record any more stuff. Apparently they had some stuff written, but it seems like it wouldn't be Cave In without him now.
You know, there's going to be a tribute with Stephen Boski and I think it's Adam McGrath. They're both playing acoustic set at Roadburn Festival this year.
Right, okay.
I think they were asked by Jacob Bannon to do it, because he's curating it this year. So that'll be interesting.
Okay, so Success, Jupiter, definitely going in. If you don't like it, piss off.
We have been proven
wrong.
wrong in the past, though.
Yes.
Next week we are going to cover
Venetian Snares with Rosk Silag Alet Shuletit. I mean, I don't
We
know
just
if that's
ran the tape
right. I
backwards.
do-
You've
yeah,
made-
who
you've made an ass of
absolutely
that.
And
So-
that being the case, we're all very excited about that, I'm sure. But we have a little announcement to make.
Before we do that, go and vote on our Facebook page. Can you do that, please?
Whatever.
And if you could, we really appreciate ratings and reviews, because they are our lifeblood. They make us feel good. And like I've said before, like we've all said before, 2 people really like the podcast. So we'd like to make that at least 3.
It's
if
mum and
not
dad.
4. Yeah. But yeah, we do have an announcement, Christopher.
I'm so excited. On the 27th of May, the Unsung Podcast will attempt its very first live episode from the Flying Duck in Glasgow.
I am enjoying your live voice there, Christopher. It's excellent. There is a taxi outside for Macduff. If you could please make your way outside.
If you find yourself in the vicinity of the Flying Duck in Glasgow on the 27th of May 2018, you can join us for the Unsung Podcast. Wait for it. Live grunge mixtape.
Live tonight. Maybe
sold out.
So if you listen to our new metal mixtape, we will be bringing a record each from the grunge genre and battling it out to get one of them
so
in
rich
there.
pickings.
Oh, just a delight. I mean, I
own so many check shirts, and anybody that knows me is just rolling their eyes right now. I was born for this.
I know this is your new metal for me, whereas I had 2 records I could choose from basically, and you vetoed one of them, so that's fine.
That makes sense. That'll there's reasons for that though. We'll also be having some live music.
There'll be some live musical interludes on a theme that will make the whole thing even better than it already is. But to that end, to get tickets for the live grunge mixtape at the Flying Duck Glasgow, May 27th, please go onto our site. There'll be a page up as of today when this episode comes out, and it will explain the process. But it's only going to be $2 for a ticket, just to try and make sure that you actually turn up, because it's very limited in terms of space. But be there or be square, and when you hear it, you'll wish you'd made the effort. It's a Sunday afternoon. It'll be kicking off about 2 p.m, so you should be home in time for your last
Songs
of the
of
summer
Praise.
wine and Songs of Praise. And you
Country
should have
File, actually.
Country
Do you
File
know Country File is like the
have that
top-rated Sunday
in Sri
program?
Lanka.
I don't know.
Sorry, Sri Lankans.
So as Chris says, go to www.unsongpod.net/events. You can buy tickets there with an S. Events. With an S.
I'm hot for this. We're going to mention it a few times.
Yeah, it's going to
Can't wait.
keep coming up. You're going to get sick of it, and you get to see our lovely faces as well, which is
To get to wear my corn t-shirt.
Uh-oh.
no.
Oh no. Do I have to wear a
No,
grunge
it's a
t-shirt?
grunge,
Yes.
yeah, it have to be flannel.
Oh, I don't know if I have a grunge.
Wear some
wardrobe.
flannel. We're all going to wear the same Nirvana t-shirt that we bought from the same
Ripped
shop at the
jeans.
same
that's
time.
fine.
Flannel and a gunshot wound.
Oh, the patter is here.
This is going south
Tip
really
of the
quickly.
iceberg. All right, folks, thanks for that.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.